this room. So when I say who's ready to wow their stakeholders, you guys go, wow, right? Okay.
I think I'll say free beer, because I think that would
You're killing my joke. Who's ready to wow their stakeholders? And who's ready to have awesome business results? Okay. All right. Now everybody's ready to go. So tonight it's gonna be a workshop. I haven't managed to do this in like an hour-and-a-half format before, so it'll be interesting to see how this little pilot test goes. So what we're going to do is sort of work on your projects. I'm going to go through do some quick reviews of some best practices and some techniques that work, and then spend some time asking some questions about your projects and give you a chance to fill in this sheet. And so just to give you a little bit more background about me, I've been managing projects, even though I know I look like I just got out of high school. I've been managing projects for too many years to mention, because that would, not be good. And I've sort of gotten a reputation for rescuing projects and coming in and sort of really pinpointing what's going wrong with projects and really helping teams figure out, creating order out of sort of chaotic situations, and really helping them figure out what they need to do to right-size what they're trying to achieve and really look to achieve results. So I do that for my clients. I'm really lucky I get to do that today for a number of local clients, and have my business now 10 years this year. So it's good. It's good to be able to get out there and do this. And so it's good to be able to be here and to give back to you guys too, and to talk you through this and see if the format works for you. And I'm looking forward to seeing what your feedback is at the end. So let's jump in. So everybody should have a sheet like this on their table. There should be at least one each. So if you don't have one, put your hand up and let's get you one. So what we're going to do with this is, everybody have one? Got enough copies? Yeah. Okay. So we're using this very simple traffic light to color in. So you get crayons too, so it's like being back in kindergarten. This is like a fun PMI meeting. You guys didn't know you were going to color when you were here tonight, but so there should be enough crayons to go around for everybody. And if you need more crayons, just raise your hand or about 20. Oh, look. Here we go. That one's so spare. I couldn't find boxes. All right, so sounds like everybody has crayons, which is good. So let's talk about what we're going to do with these crayons. So what we're going to do is I've got a couple of slides in each area, and then I'm going to stop and there'll be a DIY section, and in that DIY section we'll have some questions, and as we're going through the questions, you guys will go through each of the cells on this chart, and you'll color it in red, yellow, or green based on some criteria. So red means you're not really doing it at all, or you have significant gaps, right? It would not pass the Smith test. Amber is you're sort of doing it, but you know you've got some gaps there, and there's some things that you probably should go back and revisit to make sure that it's okay. And green means you're sort of doing it at the level that will ultimately get you to a successful project. And here's the catch-up. The team agrees that that would be the case, right? It's not just your perspective. If you asked your team, they'd say, yeah, we agree that that's the case, and the sponsor would agree that's the case. So before we jump in, this is what a finished one looks like. I think I have one, it doesn't try too on an objector, but this is what it looks like, sort of finished. So just before we jump in, how many people here, just so I know what we have in the audience, how many people are PMP certified? Okay, good number of people. And is there anyone here who's totally new to project management? Never managed projects before? Okay, Andrew, you're in the right place, believe me. It might it might pass very quickly for you, but we can come back and circle. If you've got questions, put your hand up and I'm happy to come talk to you. So in this is a spirit of a review, not necessarily a coaching session around project management practices. So I think it'll work for most people in the room. Andrew will be playing catch up, but that's okay. And so what we'll do is sort of just jump in and get going, and then as we go along, I'll sort of give you more directions. So too many projects, we've seen this, I think we've probably all seen this, too many projects fail to be completed, have cost overruns, don't meet their goals at all, and just slip and slide way past their traditional go live date. And these statistics, believe it or not, are the positive ones. There's like so many more statistics out there showing failure. And in this day and age, we've been using structured methods to manage projects for decades at this point, right? So why are we still in this situation, right? It's, how many people here have been on a project that's failing or has failed badly? How does that feel? Demoralizing, icky, stressful. Yeah, stressful for our teams too. So I get called in, unfortunately, just even still to sort of come in and help people get projects back on track. This summer, I was called into an organization, a local organization, who had tried to do an implementation of a document imaging and workflow system with the vendor. The vendor had a PM. They had no other internal PM. And the project probably cost them around $500,000 to do. Wasn't done well, de-scoped the critical functionality that they need. At go live, it completely disrupted their business. They were out of business for 5 weeks, couldn't do anything for 5 weeks. They lost their key people. They're like, I'm fed up with this shit. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm out of here. Lost their key people. And they were still, then they had to hire us and pay us to try and help them figure out what went wrong. So we see this again and again, right? And it all comes down to some basic concepts. And another client who had a project manager from the implementation vendor, the project manager was PMP certified, brought us in because the project had slipped by 6 months. We come in, it took me about 20 minutes looking at the plan to realize that they didn't have a plan. And they were doing this massive, massive transformation across 3 organizations. No plan, no accountability, nobody really knew what was going on, but some really seasoned project managers at the helm. And so why is it, I ask myself, why does a PMP certified project manager get themselves into trouble like that? What is it that's happening on our projects that, let us get into this situation? And I think when we look at it, when we look at all these situations, it's some of the basic elements that tend to sort of slip away from us. So if we can really focus in on the basics, not that fancy tools and stuff, but the real basics, and really get the basics right, then I think we can solve these problems for clients and then just stop burning money and churning and burning out our people, which is even worse. So teams are under pressure. So I work with a lot of clients. I just see this in nearly every single client that I work with, and I doubt if any of you guys would disagree with what's up here. Constantly shifting priorities. The work that people are asked to work on doesn't align with the strategic objectives. The strategic objectives aren't clear, and the team don't even know what they are anyway. And there's just this constant churn. Management are disconnected. They don't really know what it takes to do the work. So they keep coming up with these bright, shiny ideas, and then they sort of say, oh, go do this, but they don't realize they're derailing 15 other things. Meanwhile, people are working at home in the evenings, they're working at night, they're burning out, they're stressed, and then what happens? The quality of their work suffers. And so this is just this cycle that we see in pretty much every single client that I end up working with. There's some element of this chaos going on. And the brave clients are the ones who step back and say, okay, we want to end the madness. We want to actually try to be proactive and figure out what we're doing and do it the right way. But that's a hard shift for clients to make. And it means mostly the executive managers and the executive teams need to stop causing the chaos in the first place. And that's not a conversation that they're often willing to have. They'll have the conversation, but then they won't want to do what it's going to take to actually put measures in place to really help support their teams and make things successful. Does this resonate with anybody? No? Sound familiar? All too familiar? Yeah. All right, so how do we ensure success? These are some critical success factors that I sort of bring along to every single client engagement, and I'm sure they're all ones that you guys recognize. I think it's so important to start with a clear strategy, clear vision, be really clear about what you're trying to do, and be really clear about how the project ties into what the organization is trying to achieve, and make sure that it's actually going to propel the organization forward. Make sure that you've got engaged sponsors, stakeholders, you've got the right people around the table. You just don't have a name in the box, but they're actually engaged and they're being supportive. Clear accountability and ownership is really important as well. Managing the details, like really, really keeping a tight handle on the details. It doesn't have to be onerous, it doesn't have to be drudgery, but it does have to be organized. And then just being really, really clear about requirements. If you read any of the reports around why projects fail, gaps in requirements is like one of the top reasons as to why projects fail. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's a huge issue. And so what I like to do is sort of bring this in and then work with client teams to say, okay, for your project, what else would we add to this list? Let's make sure we're all clear on what it's actually going to take to make this project successful for you in your environment right here. Anything else that you guys would add to this list right now?
It's probably underneath one of these bullets, but like a communication plan.
Yeah, communication. I have transparent team communications, but yes, but not just team, but in general. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I would add metrics to measure success.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good one.
I would add governance rules.
Yeah. Right. Good. All good. So, the chart that you've got is somewhat centered on the PMBOK framework. And one of the things that I want to call out is we often, this execute piece, when I'm teaching sort of new students, I mean, you guys all know this, but when I'm teaching new students, I say this execute's like a placeholder, right? The execute could be design, build, test. It could be 3 separate phases. It could be iterating with the plan phase. For the purposes of this, I sort of dial it in like this to make it generic. The piece I want to call it is this monitor and control. We tend to think that monitor and control starts when we begin the real work in earnest, the execute piece. So we don't have a plan up front for how we're going to get the upfront work done, how are we going to do the discovery, how are we going to gather the requirements. And monitor and control runs the whole way through. So right out of the gate, you really need to have a plan for the work that you're going to do. Even if it's a plan to say, here's what the next 6 to 8 weeks look like, there should at least be a plan and some semblance of who's going to do the work and what that work is. I see this is a gap that I see missed pretty much all the time. And so this is something I use for new students too, just to really orientate them on what's important about each phase. So when we're thinking about the key activities, this is sort of how I look at it. So, you know, in the initiate phase, we've got some sort of seed, we've got an idea for a project, we have to do the discovery, and one of the deliverables out of that is really the project charter. So we're really thinking about what the project's about, what's the compelling why for the project at that point. Then we go into the plan phase, so we use that charter as an input, and we're really figuring out, well, how, you know, you're gathering obviously the requirements, but you're thinking about how is the project going to unfold, how are we going to achieve this? And ultimately, you should come out with a project plan, and then you use that plan to execute and continue the work. Now, I often, it never really unfolds like this for the projects that I run. These cycle, right? The plan, execute, those phases tend to cycle all the time, and I'm sure it's the same on your projects. It's more iterative in nature. But this, I think, if you're thinking about the bare bones of what you need to do, it needs to be sort of covered within some of these elements. So we're going to jump in, do a couple of slides on some of the key tools in the initiate or discover phase, and then we're going to get you coloring. So getting started. So in the initiate phase, I mean, one of the big things is the project charter clearly, and I see organizations that just sort of rush to get a charter completed. How many people here have done project charters? Okay, I'd expect that, right, because you're all PMP certified. But how many people rush to get the project charter completed and then celebrate when it's done? Nobody. Right answer, you guys. So to me, I mean, it's really about taking the time to discover what the project's about and really asking the case as to why. And so I see, you know, one of my clients had a situation where we were actually doing a new project with them, and as part of the requirements in the new project, the client brought up this requirement, oh, I need a report to do ABC. And the guy who was a tech lead was sitting beside me, he said, well, we give you that report like a year ago, you know, you asked us for that report and we developed it and we give it to you. And they're like, oh, which report? And then they're like, well, that report. Oh no, that report never did what we wanted it to do. I mean, it really wasn't what we needed. So a lot of people hear clients say, I need X, or their client or their stakeholder, I need X. And then they run off and do X, but they don't step back and say, why do you need X? What is it that you're trying to do? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? And it might seem like, you know, really at kindergarten level to call that out, but it's one of those issues that I see again and again and again. People just want to run and do the work without actually taking the time to stop and say, you know, really, is that the right work to do? How does that line up with what we're trying to do in the organization? How does it line up with our strategy? Is this the right time to do that work? Do we have the right people to do that work? What does that look like? How does this fit into our big picture architecture from a technical perspective or a business functional perspective? So these, to me, are all the questions that you want to try to get answered right up front. And I tell, you know, students that actually I do a lot of classes in this room for UVM. So when I'm in here with these students, I say, look, you know, you get to the point of having your charter done, you've discovered a lot of information. You might want to call it at that point and say, you know what, this project shouldn't go ahead because we're not ready to do it. The organization's not ready to do it, the resources aren't ready to do it. Just because you're in and you've done a project charter and you've figured all these things out doesn't mean you should keep going, right? It's a milestone for a reason, it's a gateway for a reason, right? You might want to stop it at that point. So stakeholder analysis, this is another area. So one of the key reasons projects fail is because stakeholders are missed, and when stakeholders are missed, then requirements are missed. And so again, with PMP certified project managers and project managers that I've worked with that have managed projects for a long time, this is one of the areas that they jump over. And so they'll probably put a list of stakeholder names into a charter and think they've done a stakeholder analysis, but they haven't actually done that. So a true stakeholder analysis is when you actually group out all of the people that are impacted by your project, either by the project itself or by the outcome of the project, and then you've taken the time to analyze them and say, okay, who's really interested in our success? Who's got some baggage and who might try to derail us? Whose priorities are shifting in a different direction and might not be aligned with what we're trying to do? And then how are we going to engage them and communicate with them through this project? And then you produce a communication plan from it. And all of that good information that you gather at this point is typically not what you want to disclose to a full team, right? So you keep it to yourself. You know, you don't really want to be, you know, having it out on your portal that this stakeholder has this type of baggage, right? But you need to know that because you can't build relationships with them if you don't know how to communicate with them. And if you don't know what their pet peeves are, if you don't know that they never read their email, the admin reads their email, or you know they're notoriously bad at responding, or if you don't know those things and if you haven't analyzed those things, then you can't engage them properly in the project, and then your project will have failures as a result. It'll either be gaps in requirements, quality issues, issues that come up late in the day, or just generally unhappy stakeholders saying that your project's a mess. So how many people here do this religiously on every project? A couple, okay. Good, there's going to be plenty of yellow on your charts then. The yellow one will be worn out. Project charters, so I want to call out, so what was your definition of a project charter? Ignore what you saw. Anybody, what would you say a project charter is?
It's how to start, where to finish, basically, definition of the structure.
Definition of the project structure, okay. Well, anybody else? Pardon?
I call it an executive summary of the
Executive summary of the project, okay, yep. Operations, how the project team's going to operate. Okay. Anyone else?
Names of project manager.
It does.
Milestones.
Yep. It sets some authority for the project. Yep. It does all those things. The way I look at it is it's like a tool that we use to facilitate conversations with the team and the stakeholders, get everybody on the same page, and then document it in a way that it can be that living reference, help keep the team organized, help keep the project organized, and give the project the authority that it needs to go ahead. The key piece here is that it's only a tool and it's facilitating conversations. So what I see happen all the time is that we've got this nice fancy template that covers like all of these types of sections, right? And it's a great template, and we use this template consistently, and it's very dull, and it's black and white, and it's something that a project manager puts together on their own in a room, and sometimes they'll go review it with the team, but 99% of the time they send it out via email and ask for feedback. And guess how many people read it? And if they read it, are they interpreting it correctly? So again, I'm working with clients right now, and I'm advising them on how to really do things differently and sort of bring their leadership to a different level. And one of the things I say is, right, it's great that you're doing a charter and having these conversations. Have the conversations documented in the charter, then pull some of this info out into a presentation, get everybody in a room together, walk through that presentation with questions. The presentation shouldn't be like 50 slides, 5, 6 slides, facilitating the conversation so that everybody in the room is getting on the same page with the project, and then you're moving the project forward solidly. So if your charter's not necessarily at that level for the project that you're going to look at tonight, then you'll need the red or yellow marker. Crayon, sorry. All right, steering committees. So this is another area that I see organizations sort of falling down a little bit. So sometimes our projects are small and it doesn't feel like they really warrant their own steering committee, so we don't necessarily formalize the steering committee piece at all. In those cases, I really advocate for, let's say there's an executive business and IT team that come together on a monthly basis reviewing all their projects. Well, this project should be reported out at that level. There needs to be some sort of level of executive oversight and support for the project in some sort of steering committee fashion. So you can blend a number of projects, a number of programs, or even a portfolio into one meeting. That's okay, but there needs to be some structure in place to make this work. Steering committee meetings, just when they're run properly, there's like a single point of accountability. There's your opportunity to get stakeholder groups in a room. It's an opportunity for you to step back as a project manager. You can step yourself out of the weeds, and you can really step back and look at this 50,000-foot view of your project, look at the risks, look at the issues, look at the alignment, hear from them around what's going on in their parts of their organization. It could be internal or external stakeholders, what's going on, what do they need to consider, and then you trade information with them too. When you don't have some sort of steering committee in place, this is when you start to get disconnected from the management, the executives in your organization, and the stakeholders themselves. And when there's disconnect, then you have these executives thinking that this project over here is just sort of running by itself, and then throwing down more work to their teams. So they're disconnected to the work that the teams are actually doing, and that's resulting in real impact to the project teams. So this again is another area. They're also a decision-making authority, and I think having a real clear philosophy and methodology around how decisions are made, and looking at your team structure and saying what types of decisions are made at what level is really important for the success of the project, and that's something else that you could put in your charter as well. So how many people here run steering committee meetings on their projects?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
What would you say if there was a steering committee, so there was multiple companies involved in executing a project? So one of the companies is the purchaser. The project is for them. And there's other companies that are supplying like most of the work. And so we call company A, the guy that's paying the bill, and these other companies do most of the work. So they have a steering committee, but it doesn't involve anybody in company B or C.
That's a problem. You need, and so we've had a number of clients who've been in that situation, and the project has suffered as a result.
It's
Yeah,
kind of a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
I wanted to do.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important one, right? Because you need the vendors to be at the table, and you need the executive folks from the vendors to be at the table, because if things are not going well with that vendor team, you need to have open and transparent communications about it, and you need to be a collaborative team at that executive level, and looking at how do you solve problems to move this forward. And if you don't have all of the different parties at that table, or a representative of them at that table, then that results in issues. So fight hard to really get the steering committee in place. The other thing I would say, I always start a steering committee meeting with the role and responsibility of the sponsor and the stakeholders, and even the different stakeholder groups. There might be tiered responsibility depending on what that looks like. And I put that out clearly on that inaugural meeting for the steering committee. This is what we're expecting from you. So we're going to meet once a month, and here's what we're expecting you to do. Here's what we're going to do for you. You can hold us accountable, but we're holding you accountable to this. This is your role. And that really clarifying those roles and responsibilities right out of the gate is really important as well. Any other questions on steering committees? All right, so now we're in the fun part. So what I'm going to do is I've got a number of slides that we're going to go through, and each of the slides corresponds to either one or more cells. So we're in the initiate phase. So you're going to go through, ask yourself these questions, and then either color it in red, amber, green. Right? Red means you're not doing it at all, or it's really deficient. Amber is, or yellow, sorry, I'm in the United States now. I've been away a long time and still calling it amber. So that is gaps that you need to go back and figure out. And green means you are just the best PM ever, and if the PMI come in and audited your project, they would give you, a gold star and 100%. Right? Does everybody have a project that they're working on for this? Blue was a spare crayon in the packet because I couldn't find a packet that only had red, amber, and green. So if you're thinking about a project, if you don't necessarily have a project, I have students that have used this as well for self-improvement. So, all right. So first set of questions for the project sponsor. So often we know who the sponsor is on the project, but the question about do they know what their role is? Are they the decision maker? Is it clear? Are they engaged? Are they connected to the team? Are they very disconnected? So ask yourself these questions and then color in your sponsor cell. Okay, yes.
Can you switch to the slide with the legend, the color key?
Yeah.
We're very literal.
Okay. I'll flip back quickly. Okay, and then I'll go forward again. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Way back there? Yep. Okay. All right, last chance to look at these. I'm not flipping back again. So red means you're not doing it or you've got significant gaps. Yellow is there's gaps or you're sort of doing it, but you know based on our conversation tonight that you need to go back and revisit some stuff. Green means it would pass the sniff test for a PMP audit. Anybody who's ever come in and look at your project, I don't think they audit projects like that. But red, amber, green? Oh, it doesn't work if you're colorblind or Y and G. Are you colorblind?
I thought I was going to be caught in a line of fire there for a minute.
Okay, is everybody good with the sponsor? Is everybody colored in the sponsor? Okay. So stakeholders, let's move on to stakeholders. So do you know who all your stakeholders are? Do they know that they're stakeholders on your project? Do they know what their role is on their project? Are they engaged? Are you able to go to them with decisions? Do they make decisions quickly for their group? Have you figured out, have you gone through an analysis to figure out how you're going to communicate with them and engage them on the project, and do you have a plan around that? If you're missing stakeholders, if you think you might not know all the stakeholders or might not all be included, then it needs to be at least yellow. And are they helping the project team? I think that's really important, right? How much are they invested in the success of the project? How engaged are they? How helpful are they to the project team? If they're back, holding people back and derailing things behind the scenes, then it's red. Okay, are we good with stakeholders? Yeah? All right. Governance model. So do you have a governance model in place? Do you have a structure for your team? Do you have steering committee meetings in place? Do you have program meetings in place? Are the roles and responsibilities clear? Does everybody show up? Do they show up? Do they participate? Are they regular meetings? stakeholders, steering committee? So team charter. So this is a little bit of a longer one. So, you know, the question is not just do you have a project charter, but how complete and accurate is your project charter? Has it been vetted with your project team? Has it been vetted with all your stakeholders? If you have a yellow mark in the box for stakeholders, then you're going to need at least a yellow mark in the box for the project charter because you've probably missed some stuff. So do you have roles and responsibilities? Do you have guiding principles for your team? Do you have success criteria? Does it include risks, issues? What do you know about? Does it include dependencies, prerequisites? How robust was that project charter creation process? Do the team know where to find it? Would the team agree with it? That's a lot of questions. I'll stop asking questions now. So this covers like the team, project and team charter, the team being mobilized, scope, and approach. Okay, so there's 4 cells that sort of line up with the project charter. And then if you need some ideas around things to put down in your action plan, you know, here's some ideas around what you need to do to really sort of develop a robust charter. So just really getting in a room and talking to all of your stakeholders. Okay, are we good with project charter? Do you need another minute? Is this making sense so far? Any questions? Okay, so the last piece here is project organization. So this is often a piece that's sort of like completely skipped over. We're using a file share, we're using SharePoint, we're using something. But most often, project team members have no clue where to find information on the project. It's not held in a common methodology. The folder structure is not the same across projects. Some organizations do a good job here and they have good tools and it's set up in a very, very sort of organized way and people do know where to find information. But if your team don't know where to go find information, then they're coming to you all the time and that's a drain on your time and that's not a good use of your time. So you want to spend time up front getting your project repository organized, figuring out how you're going to share information. What is the, you know, are you going to publish information in certain ways? Do you have a versioning mechanism for your documents? What happens when things get published? All of those questions. Making sure that the team can self-serve, the team can find information, and the information in there is accurate and up to date. And everybody's responsible for keeping it up to date. So if you don't have it or it's not at that level, then it needs to be sort of red or yellow. If we could line up your team members and they would all say they could find things, then it would be green. Okay. Good so far? All right. So before we move on, how did that go? Anybody with like all green in their initiate phase? Nobody? But you guys are all PMPs. How can you not have all green in your initiate phase? You're not done an initiate yet. Is anyone else still in the initiate phase of the project? 2 projects in the initiate phase.
Oh.
Okay, because people are in active projects, right? So they could be in the middle of their project or they could be in the initiate. It will. Mike's actually in the initiate. He's starting a new project, right? So everybody else's project's in flight somehow beyond the initiate phase. Is that right? Good. That's good. I'm going to get some more benefit from this then. But you'll know all the things to do the right way.
I'll just use another project to go through this.
Okay, that works too. All right, so anybody want to share any of their actions that they've put down from that section? Did you mark some actions in here for you guys to go back to and sort of remember when you go back and look at this tomorrow, what you want to go back and revisit? Anybody got some actions they want to share? You got some?
Identify all stakeholders of the project.
Awesome. That's a good one. Anyone else got stakeholder actions? Couple of people. Okay. All right, good. Let's keep moving. I forgot to tell you at the start, I have some prizes. So, you know, if you needed incentive to do this, we're going to do a competition to win this book at the end. The person with the most robust analysis gets this. And then people, you've got little win cards on your desk. So as you go along, you can fill in a win card. We've got a bag where we'll collect them, and then we'll draw 3 winners out for these awesome weekly planners.
Define robust for us.
Robust means it's not all green, because that would be dishonest, right? Because even my projects wouldn't be all green, just to be fair.
Variety is it?
Well, it's got they've got a clear action plan. It sort of looks like this, right? It's like it's got a good action plan. And the tables are going to vote on the winner at each table, and then we'll do a round that sort of compares all of those. We'll make it fun. We'll get out of here at some point tonight before midnight is here. All right, so let's jump into the plan phase. So the plan phase, often we sort of jump into this and we just are all about the project plan. So have you guys seen this before? I'm sure you have, right? This has been around, apparently, this has been around since the 1970s. I was shocked when I read that. I was like, if this has been around from the 1970s and we've known about this from the 1970s, why are we still building, like, you know, roller coasters instead of tire swings, right? And yet we still have this problem in all of our projects where we're not really fine-tuned into the detail of just delivering what our client wants or what our stakeholder needs versus all the stuff they say they want, right? So I put this up in front of students because it's like it's a funny example, but it scares me that we're what are we, 2020? So this is 50 years old. Like, that's crazy. So we need to stop the madness on the tire swings. So one of the key reasons that projects fail is gaps in requirements. Now, how many people had gaps in stakeholders on their initiate phase? A number of you. All right, so your requirements box over here is going to be red or yellow, right? Because if you've missed stakeholders up front, then you're going to certainly have missed requirements. And so gaps in user requirements is one of the top reasons for projects failing. And of course they're going to fail if you don't have the right people in the room and if you're not facilitating those conversations. So I think what's really important is to stop, regardless of the size of the project and regardless of whether it's agile or waterfall or some blend in the middle, you need to know what it is you're doing, right? So the focus is what are you doing and why are you doing it? So documenting requirements, getting in a room, even if it's just verifying requirements, it's really important to have them documented in some sort of list and grouped into categories so people can look at them in black and white and then really take a look to see what's missing. If you're just talking about this as part of a meeting and it's not really documented, then people walk away and they forget about what you've talked about. If it's documented in a list, they can look at it and go, oh, you know what, we've totally missed this whole section of requirements. So it's really important to document things. It's really important to have the conversations. Really important to involve all stakeholders and to be clear and unambiguous. So I think the statement here is requirements are, I originally had requirements are complete, but even that word is ambiguous, right? You might think it's complete, but is it clear, concise, unambiguous? Can you hand that requirement to somebody and they know what it means? It makes sense to them. And if we have requirements like that, then we can build our scope out and then we can build our plan and we can go forward like that. Now sometimes we don't know all the requirements, but again, you want to get to the core requirements. And then you also want to be prioritizing the requirements because there's a lot of stuff that comes out when you have these conversations and not all of it's important. And some of it should never be done. Some of it should never be built. It should be just on this, we're going to do it later list, right? And then you get it live, you push it out, and then they go, well, I don't really need that function anymore. I don't know what I was thinking, right? So you have to, as a project manager, you have to really think about really dissecting what's needed and facilitating those conversations to really elicit the information from them in a way that really dials you into the most important piece of information that's needed, the most important outcome that's needed for the project. and leave all the rest behind, put it on a do later list and focus in on what's important. Anybody disagree with me here? No? I had a client actually, so I run a couple of projects for this client. They then sort of run out of funds and they said, we're going to run our next project on our own. And I said, okay, here's a methodology, use the methodology, here's all my templates, use all my templates. So they knew what they were doing, they'd run through a couple of projects with me. And they took on, it was a Salesforce customization project. And those sound like they're very vanilla, right? Because Salesforce is this sort of cloud platform. But you can just customize Salesforce to be some other entire entity, right? It's this whole software customization project and workflow transformation project. So they got in and they completely skipped over the requirements analysis phase because they knew, they had shared, the Salesforce was there, we know what it's doing, we just built it out 9 months ago, we know what it's doing. And so they skipped all the way over it, and I came in and did the debrief with them after this all happened. And so skipped over it and went all in, and then they got to user acceptance testing and realized they'd missed some stuff. And they'd missed some stuff because the users weren't using Salesforce or the workflows the way they'd built them or the way they intended to be used, because that didn't really work for them. They were doing it some other way. And so then they went live, and when they went live, they missed like 3 or 4 integrations that were critical for running the business. So it had completely disrupted their business and went all the way up to the president. And I got called in to come in and, you know, talk to them and manage the next project for them and do the debrief. And when we did the debrief, they all recognized that, you know, we should not have skipped over the requirements because we thought we knew what we were doing, but we didn't. So this is like, just don't skip over the requirements. It can be simple. It can be an hour-long meeting. It can be a 2-hour-long meeting. It doesn't have to be a week of a whole team in a room, right? You can do this stuff really simply and still be effective. So this is just a framework that I like to use. So I look at, when I'm doing requirements, I really look at the current, what are you doing right now? I really don't want to have a conversation about what you're doing, what you want to do in the future if I don't know what you're doing right now. If you're trying to get from here to, I don't know, you know, the other end of Vermont, you have to plug in where you're starting, right? I'm starting in Burlington. I'm going to, I don't know, Montpellier or wherever. You know, it's the same deal here. You have to plug in where you're started. You have to know where you are, what your current state is. You have to know the pitfalls. It might be as simple as sort of doing some sort of workflow with sticky notes on a wall and taking a photo of it and putting that in your document, right? If it's a small project. It doesn't have to be elaborate. I'm spending a week in a room creating these very fancy process charts. It can be really simple. Simple can be effective. And then the same for your future. So you go through your current state, maybe do a SWOT analysis on what's working, what's not working, where's our opportunities, and then look at what is our true requirements going forward, what's going to solve our need going forward, where's the regulatory constraints, technical constraints, business constraints, and what else do we need to have in place going forward, and bring all of that in to a very refined requirements list, and then prioritize the list. And this sounds like it's a lot of work. It doesn't have to be, but you can either do the work right now up front when you've got people's focus, or you can do it at the end of UAT or testing when everybody's really, really mad at you and burnt out from the project, and now you have to slip the project 6 weeks, right? So you choose where you prefer to do it. And if you do it well here, then it makes the development of your test cases a breeze, because you already have the information that you need to refer back to. So it actually makes life easier as the project goes on. So then planning out the work. So this is another piece that's sort of done a little bit loosey-goosey. So really getting really clear on who's going to do what, when are they going to do it, and really clear role assignment. It drives me crazy when I see a task assigned to multiple people or assigned to a generic role. Well, who's going to do that? Well, you know, Dave and I are both down to do the task, and Dave's going to do it for sure. I know he's doing it, so I'm not going to do it, right? It's like, that doesn't work. So it's got to be clear assignment, and the person who you're assigning to's got to know that you're doing the work. And the other thing that I think we do as project managers, we often have these very elaborate plans that we can read and understand, but the project team can't read. So if your project team can't self-serve, get to the plan, see what work they need to do, and be able to understand the approach from the plan, then your plan isn't worth the document that it's written on, right? Because nobody can use it. So we had a great plan on the project. One of the projects I just come off and we finished it. The plan looked very fancy. It was about 2,000 lines long. It had a lot of phases in it. It was produced by the vendor. It wasn't done by me. A lot of phases in it, a lot of structure in it, but it was structured in a way that nobody could find the information. And it was like you had to really dig down 7 levels to get to the task of what you were trying to do. So who used the plan? Nobody. At a certain point, we threw it out and we said, we're not even going to use it either, right? Let's reformat it. So this view here, I just want to call out, this is a company called PMICV who are local. I don't know, has anybody used this tool? So he's got a new web version that's really cool and it's free. And so I've given this tool to entrepreneurs who have no technical background, like nutritionists and psychotherapists and stuff like that, don't like technology. And they've watched the overview video in 15 minutes, have gone in self-serve, set up their own plan, and got their team up and running on it. So it's really simple, intuitive project management. So if you're looking for a tool that's easy for your team to adopt, I put this sign up link right here, myhi.me sign up. All right, so planning the work, clear roles and responsibilities. So I'm doing a couple of surveys right now with clients around how work gets accomplished in their organizations. And one of the key themes that keeps coming back in these surveys, and one of the surveys, I think we have like 140 people have responded across the organization. And it keeps coming back to clarity. If there's one word on a project, it's clarity. They need to have clarity. So clear roles, who's doing what, what's my responsibilities, no assumptions around it, right? So the person that's being assigned the work doesn't need to make assumptions, and you're not making assumptions about what they're doing. It's really clear, and you've had open conversations about it. So the teams are asking for this, right? Your project teams, organizations are asking for this, and they're saying, we need clarity around what we're doing. I need to know what you're asking me to do. I need to really be clear on it. I've often, we've been in situations where I'm running a team of developers and we've got these tasks and maybe we've sort of let them go off and do their own technical design and then later find out that they've sort of gold-plated it because they made assumptions around what their responsibilities were for the project, and that's derailed us by 2 weeks. So assumptions kill projects. So being clear about roles, clear about responsibilities, clear about tasks, clear about ownership, that all helps the project to go smoothly. Yeah, Molly?
So I absolutely love Gracie Rasky use it all the time. But I do have a question about what level you typically use it at. So I oftentimes try to do it more at an activity level. And so I do add an S because of the actual task owners oftentimes and indicating to them that they're supporting, but the responsibility ends up being with the team lead.
Yeah.
But at what level do you typically use the recipe at?
So I rarely pull a chart together that shows every activity and the RACI chart or the RASCI chart. So it's for big projects, I think it's useful to do that so there's one point of reference. I just personally want to make sure that I'm bringing this methodology into everything that I'm doing, so that it's really clear on the project plan. If I'm going to be sending something for somebody to review, that point is on the project plan and that they know that that's coming and that their role is to review it. And then I build this into like a decision-making model and sort of build it up into some tools that I help communicate out to people so that it's easier for them to read. So like steering committee, here's your role. This is your role and responsibility. This is what we're expecting from you for decision-making, for ongoing support, for solving problems, etc. So I think the tool is good for large projects. It's probably overkill for some small projects, but bringing the concept of being really clear about who's doing what in upfront is really important. Yeah.
Do you have any words of wisdom for more the vendor-customer relationship? Because what we find ourselves trapped in is with the accountable. They love to make the decision, but as we execute, they love the vendor to own the outcome, particularly if the outcome doesn't always go as planned. So you're playing with that cycle. And then the assigned work, this is some dissecting a current project. Our customer knows they have work to do, they don't do it, and then they get upset with the decision they made, but they try to have us own their problems.
So
I know that's a lot,
yeah.
but it's a very interesting dynamic.
So we could spend a whole hour talking about vendor management and vendor engagement, and I didn't include any specific slides in here tonight about that because
I want to say I'm the vendor
in this situation, yeah, but I think it goes both ways, right?
Right.
I mean, I think it's really important. This being clear about all of this and roles and responsibility and who owns what and what the deliverables are, that needs to be done way up front before you cut the contract. And the people who are actually executing the project need to be in that room with the salespeople executing that contract, and it needs to be crystal clear. And most often that's not the case.
Absolutely.
And you know, I think vendors, we expect, as clients expect vendors to show up with a very solid, proven methodology and a very robust set of skills, because this is their sweet spot, this is the stuff they're supposed to know. And 9 times out of 10, that's not the case. Like, the vendors don't show up that way, and the vendors, in my experience, I'm sitting on the far side of that, right? I'm representing the client in that relationship. I see vendors that sort of show up and say, okay, client, here's what you're supposed to do, but they don't necessarily guide and take that client on the journey to get that done. And I think that's a piece. There's definitely room on both the customer and the vendor side, but the clarity is the most important thing. The clarity and the collaboration. We could spend a whole hour just talking about vendors. I know that probably didn't answer your question as much as you would like
Well,
to.
I mean, you raise a great point. I mean, in this particular project, we have more than taken them on the journey. And it's just again, it gets problematic in that they want the final say. So we do everything we can to bring them on the journey. But if things go awry, they're like, well, we're not owning that.
So it depends. So, you know, we'd have to dive deeper, right? But it depends on what materials you can go back to. So when I went to work for a consultancy firm, and when I got in there, they really didn't have a solid methodology that they were doing. So the projects would start to sort of unfold and then unravel when it got to user acceptance testing, client acceptance, and all the rest, right? I started to put in these formal statements of work and charters and then requirements documents, and had the client review and sign those off as we went along. So when we got down to testing and the issues came up, or acceptance and issues come up, we would draw a line right back up to here to the conversation we had, the decision that was logged saying, we had that conversation, here's why we decided not to go with it. And before that was all instituted, this would go circular. I saw it on one of my first projects. The client actually said, no, I need you to do X. And then a couple of weeks later, when we were in testing, they said, no, we need it to be Y. And it reverted back to exactly what it was in the first place. So they would just go in circles, spending our money, right? So it's about having all of these pieces in place so that you can have real conversations. And the conversations are based on fact, because you actually have it documented somewhere. You can say, see, we had this conversation in June, and here's why you decided you wanted to do it this way. So, okay. Do you have a question, Scott?
No, I was not that.
Okay. All right, so DIY. Ready for some more coloring? Retired yet? Do we need to get up and sort of do an energy dance? Or? All right, requirements analysis. So there's only a couple of slides here. So I think this covers you most of the way down. Ignore the last piece, the org change. I'm going to talk about org change in a second. But let's go through the requirements analysis. So again, if you've gaps in your stakeholders or gaps in your charter, then you're probably going to have gaps on the requirements analysis piece. So think about what are those gaps, and who do you need to meet with, and how do you need to close those gaps in, and stick that on your action plan. And also notice, have you included all of these types of requirements, like regulatory, compliance, legal, technical system requirements, constraints that you might have with the technical system side, constraints that you might have with respect to other systems that you have in place, downstream dependencies, are those all included in the requirements that you've gathered so far? How many people have gathered and documented requirements for the project they're working on? Have you guys for the people who put up their hands, have you documented current and future state workflows? If you haven't, then it might be yellow. And remember, the requirements are all about what is required. So one of the things that I see people getting into is they get into requirements conversations and it gets so derailed because people get all invested in how are we going to do it, and you need to pull them back up and remember, hey, we're just here to have a conversation about what right now. So, strong facilitation skills needed. Are we good? Finish coloring in that section? Or need an extra minute? So the project plan itself, so do you do work breakdown structures? Do you know what your outcomes or the deliverables are that are required? Do you know what the work is that's going to take to make those deliverables? Do you have a plan that includes all the tasks? And this is where it starts to get easy, because if you've missed stakeholders, or you have gaps in your charter, or you haven't gathered requirements, then this has got to be at least yellow, but maybe red. Because you can't have all the activities on your plan if you've skipped over any of those steps. Do you have each task assigned to one person? Does it include all the project activities, including change management, which we haven't talked about yet? But we will in a minute. Okay, anybody all green so far in that section? What's going on, you guys? PMP certified project managers.
Well, if you're running an agile project, you can't do that.
No, but you should at least be aware of what your requirements are.
Yeah.
Right, that you should at least have a set of high-level requirements. It can't, yeah, it's because then you're going to iterate through, right? But at the very least, you should know, you should have a complete set of high-level requirements, high-level outcomes, and then, yeah, yeah, yeah.
That would be green in an agile project.
It depends. I mean, I think,
It's a little less rich.
well, yes, but then if you've got a strong methodology, and that strong methodology is in place, and you know, if you sort of know what your sprint outlines look like, and you have a rough idea of the approach, then I think it could be.
If that's what you mean by activities.
Well, yeah, but there might be some activities missing, even.
The whole idea about Agile is that you can add activities or change even late in the program, and
Yeah.
so
That's right.
you go halfway through and you're like, wait, we want to go
But
into
most,
Agile together.
but most projects will sort of progressively elaborate anyway, right? Most people are, if you're not doing agile, you're doing a hybrid, right? There's very few organizations that are following this total waterfall where you're locking everything down and never changing it, right? Mostly it's like an iteration and progressive elaboration, but you should have a high level set of requirements that you're driving that from.
Yeah, so even if you were doing agile, you could think about it in terms of your sprints, right? How often
Right.
are you changing the scope of your sprints? How often are you going into your sprints and you really do either need to keep your sprints
Yeah.
I would
the
say,
way they are?
No, I agree with everything you're
Yeah.
saying.
I would say
I'm just saying,
ideally-
you're never gonna have a detailed project plan that will be
Yeah,
taken
yeah,
of your managing your project until you're,
yeah.
you have.
And what do I say
first
in here?
iteration. You can add to it in your second iteration, but you're never gonna have.
Well, so yeah, so here, so it doesn't say project plan is complete, it says the project plan is developed,
Yeah.
right? So you're never, I mean, I don't think there's a situation where you're ever
Oh, so
in.
we're still in that
so-
vein, I'm in the project management.
We're not there yet.
Oh, this is
Slow
where-
down.
Well, we're using that project management plan.
No, no, we're not there yet. Yes, yes. Okay. So are we good here? Okay. Any surprises? Is anybody sort of surprised about anything they had to write down in terms of the actions they've got to go back to? Anything anybody wants to share? No? All right, so let's talk just quickly about organizational change management. So, who here is aware of organizational change management practices or includes those in their practice? Okay, a lot of you, good. So, I mean, I feel like this is one of the areas that ends up sort of being left by the wayside even though we know about it. So we're trying to change behaviors, but you can't change behaviors if you can't change mindsets. And we often think about organizational change management as getting the organization ready, but we forget about getting the team ready as well. So we're trying to figure out, how do we minimize resistance from the employees, and how do we maximize the adoption and maximize what we're trying to do. And we need to create that vision, we need to empower people. And so even if we're doing this on our projects, we tend to do it for all of the people that this project's going to impact. And sometimes we forget that we're pulling all of these people from our organization into our project as subject matter experts on the project team. And we're not actually taking them through a journey of what the change is going to be like for them, right? So I do a lot of work where I'm implementing Workday HR systems, and we're pulling these people out of Workday talent roles, hiring people, recruiting, interviewing, benefits analysts, and we're pulling them into the room and we're putting them on this massive project, and they've never been on a project before. So they have no idea what a project unfolds like. They don't know what it means, right? They don't realize that, wow, you mean when you say I need to test something, you mean I'm going to be 2 weeks in a room testing and 2 weeks in the room prior to that building the test cases. 4 weeks out of the office, are you kidding me? Right? So they've never really been involved in a big project like this. So we have to think about how is this project going to change them, what's going to change for them, and how do we bring them on that journey as well. So as you're thinking about change management, you have to think about it for the team and your subject matter experts and everybody who's involved in the project, as well as everybody else out in the organization that's going to eventually embrace and adopt what you're doing. So what is it? So organizational change management is really just how we transition people, right? So you're transitioning people from an old way of doing something to a new way of doing something. And org change management is just how you're going to take them on that journey and transition them. And the same for the team, right? You've got subject matter experts who are used to doing HR functions, and now you're transitioning them to a team. You've got to teach them how they need to be on a team. What does being on a team like this mean? What does their role mean? How much work is it? What's that going to feel like? You have to coach them, you have to bring them along with you for the ride. And everybody goes through some sort of journey through the change, right? There's this sort of ebb and flow journey where it starts with some resistance. Some people are early adopters and they're gung-ho for the change, and other people are more reluctant. They're already overwhelmed. They can't think about taking on something new, and they're going to resist the change. So this is really important when you think about your stakeholder groups and you think about your stakeholder analysis, is to really understand those stakeholders and what motivates those stakeholders and how do they usually adopt change. So what's the culture within those groups? What's the culture within that organization? Are they easy at adopting new things? Do they walk into new pathways and they're good with it? Or have they been bitten by something that's happened in the past? So we just did a big project for a client, and they had a big payroll project that did not go very well in the past, in the recent past, and the entire organization felt it. They ended up having to roll back after a couple of months and go back to their old system. So when we were coming in doing this new Workday project, they were really nervous. The entire organization was nervous. The CFO was really nervous because we were taking them on a journey that they had failed badly at before. So how do you do that, right? You really have to take them on that journey through change and build that trust over time. And that's what organizational change management's about. So at this point of the project, or at this point of where you are in your project in the planning phase, you should have done at least a stakeholder analysis. You should know who's going to help you champion the change through the organization for each of the stakeholder teams. You should have, if you know what your future state workflows look like, even if you're doing it in a sprint model and you know these are the workflows that we're tackling right now, you should have a change impact assessment done on those workflows to really think about, is there policy changes here that need to be communicated, and the vision around those policy decisions and the details around why they were made. Someone high up in the organization needs to communicate those if we really want people to adopt them. Is it training? Is it something else that we need to do? Knowledge, information? Do we need to get people in a room? What do we need to do to help them adopt this? So the bones of your change management plan should be included in your project plan at this stage in the plan stage. So here's the questions for org change, and it's the very last little cell at the end of plan. So if you haven't done your stakeholder analysis, or you haven't really analyzed how the change, how your deliverables are going to impact people, or if you've got a big project and bringing in subject matter experts, and you haven't really thought about how you're going to bring them on the journey, then really coach them on how to be team members working within your project, then this would need to be red or yellow. If you've got a solid change management plan, if that's all included in your project plan, you've done your change impact assessment, you have this glorious spreadsheet that says here's all our stakeholders, here's all the workflows, and here's all the impacts, then you're green. Any thoughts, questions? Anyone green on org change management? Oh, Annmarie! Woohoo! Okay. You ready to keep going? Excited to get into the manage phase? All right, so now we're going to jump into monitor and control. So we all know, right? Project management is balancing a lot of balls. Coordinating across all of these different areas. It's a lot of detail, a lot of things that need to be managed. Our role is the glue, right? We as project leaders are trying to bring it all together, connect the dots, keep people together, understand all the interdependencies across all of these areas, and make trade-offs, right? There's never enough resources, there's never enough time, there's never enough budget. There's always constraints placed around us. So we have to find a way to make trade-offs and bring the team and bring the project to fruition in the best possible way to achieve the best possible outcome, living with all the constraints that we're under. Scope management, so with this is something that happens on every single project. You know, if we don't manage it, it goes out of control. And one of the things that I teach students in my PM class is, you know, scope change, scope creep doesn't come with bells and whistles, right? It's not ringing along an alarm saying, woo, here's the scope change, come in, but watch out. I mean, it happens under the radar. It happens, oh, you've got a developer who tells you that it's going to take me half a day to make a one-line change in this piece of code. And then the developer goes off, and a week later you're doing a status meeting, and you say, okay, how's that line of code coming? And he's like, oh, well, I got in there, and then I realized that, you know, the guy who had written the function, written it really badly, and I really didn't like the style, and it wasn't up to standard, so I rewrote the entire module, and I'm still working on it. So now, so he's still working on it, he's a couple of days overdue, but he's so far in that you can't stop him. He hasn't asked permission to do it, and now suddenly he doesn't realize that now he's just expanded not just the scope of his work, but the scope of all the testing, regression testing, and the risk around deployment, right? And so this sort of stuff happens all the time in our projects. So how do you coach your teams to really think about this in a different way? And it means having different conversations with your teams. It means sort of really thinking about the team charter and the team guidelines and how you want to operate as a team, and really having really strong communication with your teams as you're going forward. So we call it gold plating, but it happens more often than not. And the one thing I want to say here, every time we change the scope, we're affecting quality, right? So it's like, you know, there's going to be issues. If we cram more and more in, if we keep tweaking things, if we keep adjusting things, then what's going to degrade is the quality. And then what's going to increase is the issues after go live. So that's just probably a mathematical equation if anybody bothered to try and write it. Risks and issues. So this is one of these things that I think as PMPs should just be a given, right? We should have well-documented risks and issues. We should have some sort of a log. It could be Excel, it could be in a different document. It should be somewhere where everybody can access it. You know, really our team members should be able to log risks and issues for review. It shouldn't just be something that's privileged for project managers. People need to be able to raise risks and issues, but then we need to be able to manage them to closure, have good mitigation plans around them, and really resolve them or accept them, right? There needs to be proactive management of risks and issues. On some of the projects I've been called in to rescue, we look for risks and issues lists, and there's maybe 5 high level, oh, we're going to be short of resources, or Jimmy is going on vacation in 2 weeks, and if he doesn't get his stuff done, and the rest, and meanwhile, it's like, hold on, where's your risk that says you have no freaking project plan? It's not there, right? And and again, I think this is one of the simplest things that we can do as project managers, is just have a more robust process around not just logging them, but actively having it be part of the conversation with our team on our status calls and on our meetings. People need to know what's there. And it actually, if you think about it, a lot of our teams are under a lot of stress, and a lot of them carry a lot of worry about projects. And so if you know yourself, if you've got something that's playing on you and keeping you awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's in your head. And if you put it on a list somewhere, and if you have a plan around it, now suddenly that stress goes away. It's on a list, it's going to be managed, and we're going to deal with it. And now it's out of your head, it's on paper. And it's the same for our team. All of this stuff that's bothering them and causing them anxiousness, if they see that you've got it on a list, and you're owning it, and you're going to be responsible for resolving it, then that's going to make them sort of sit back a little and go, okay, I can trust that this is going to be okay, I can stop worrying about it now. And our teams are carrying a lot of stress with them, and it's our job as project managers to help support them and alleviate some of that stress. And this is a really easy way to do that. And then we talked about this earlier about managing all the details. So, you know, this is like, how many times do you spend hours hunting through emails looking for stuff? I know I do it all the time, right? Oh, I know we made a decision about this before. Who made the decision? When was it made? Let me go. I have it in my email somewhere because I keep all my emails. And suddenly, you know, 50,000 searches later and you still can't find it. If you just took a split second to stick it in a log, like functional decision log, scope change log, open questions log, whatever it is, if you just set up, it could be an Excel spreadsheet with 5 different tabs, right? Or 5 different Excel spreadsheets. It can be easy. Just stick it in a log and have everybody else log stuff in there. Then you have one point of reference. And then in addition to you having one point of reference, your team know where to go find the information. So those questions that you get 20, 30 times a day, oh, what's the answer to this, or what's the situation with that, they all know where to go and find that information. So they're not coming to you with small stuff they can self-serve. And it just makes everybody more effective. So a really easy thing to do, but in my experience, I find that it's not done. And we often call these RAID logs. Do you guys, anybody here manage RAID logs or are pretty good about doing RAID logs? RAID. Risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies or decisions.
Yeah. One question I have is, what do you mean by actions?
Actions, well, it could be actions from meetings. So that's the other thing that happens, where we have meetings and we walk out of meetings, we capture actions, and then there's no follow-up on the actions.
To-do items. Okay,
To-dos,
that's
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. All right, and then project performance. So, the November session I was at, Joe, is Joe here? He did a great session. Oh, there he is down the back about performance, project performance reporting. So here, you know, just this is an example. I mean, there needs to be some formal way of communicating the status of the project. Where is the project at? How close is it to completion? What are those high-level risks? What are those high-level issues? And it needs to be produced in a way that people can consume really easily, really quickly, but yet are up to date on the project. And it needs to be consistent. And again, this is one area where maybe it's weekly, maybe it's bi-weekly. Probably shouldn't be monthly, because that really is like too long between updates, even for a year-long project. But there needs to be consistency to project status reports, and people need to be able to go and self-serve and find the information. Now, how many people are doing regular status reports? A couple of you. All right, so that part will be green on your chart then. All right, so managing your project. So this is the bucket for managing your project. I think this is the only slide we have. So you can go through and just go through all of your manage section and mark it out and make it red, amber, green. So this note that says the schedule is realistic. So again, if you're missing stakeholders or missing requirements, that's probably not accurate, right? So just think about that. Think about the implications of stuff you've missed in the earlier phases and what you might need to do here. So how are we doing? Do we have any good actions that anybody wants to share from their manage section? Anything that you got to go back and take a look at? Yes? Do you guys need another minute to back? Are you good? Okay. Is this a helpful exercise? Yes? All right, do you guys need another minute? Good? So next, there's a section on leading the team. So I really feel like we need to spend much more time in leadership capacity than in manager capacity. And so when we look at project management, we look at the art and science. Sometimes you hear it described as the hard and soft skills. So the science is the tools, the technology, the reports, the methodologies, and the art is all of that leadership qualities, right? It's the things that are more intangible, that are harder to learn, honestly. It's the people-centric piece, it's building relationships, it's knowing when to ask questions, it's knowing when to stop asking questions, it's knowing how to hold people accountable, and it's stuff that you learn over time. So, you know, I recently worked on a project with a new project manager, and I was doing some digging because there was some frustration with the new project manager. He had never managed a large project before, and he was showing up in a way that was very checklist oriented, right? It was very process oriented. It was like he was, you know, he had this script that he was following, and he was driving people crazy, right? Because he was following the script. And I Googled some stuff, and I was looking at it, and I came across this chart, and someone had developed this chart saying, here's all the skills that you learn as a project manager. And he was, all of the things he was doing was on the new element, and all of the things here about the art was like after 10 years in project management, you gradually learn all of these skills, and you learn it the hard way, right? Now, so personally, I've learned it the hard way. I have scars, right? I've stood on trading floors and been yelled at when the system has gone down at 3 minutes to 4, and there's $30 million sitting in the pipe, and dealt with it, right? I've had stakeholders who are irate, and you have to, you know, you learn how to manage it. You learn how to, you build better practices. You build better sort of scientific practices, but you also build better people-centric practices and really think about leading the team, guiding the team, and helping support and enable the team to be successful. And I really feel like we should not think of ourselves as project managers. I actually don't even like that term, right? I think we should think of ourselves as project leaders, right? So if you call yourself a leader, and if you give yourself the authority to go in and lead change and lead transformation in your organization, how would you approach your job differently, right? Project managers tend to accept the things that they're given, they accept the constraints that they're given, they accept what they're being told, right, in many ways. A leader would challenge that. A leader would challenge the status quo and say, no, can you please tell me why we need to do this? Or, you know, stakeholder, I know you want that, but, you know, here's the 5 other things you would need to give up to get that. And you know, that's not your call. I have 3 other stakeholders who needs to be in that decision, right? So you have the hard conversations, and you're able to go out and have confidence in your own power to have those conversations and really lead and guide the team. And at the end of the day, it's about supporting the team and being able to build the trust of the team. So I would ask yourself as you're sitting here, you know, when you look at this list, you know, when you go into your job every day, are you showing up in a manager capacity? Are you showing up like that sort of new process checklist guy? Or are you showing up as a true leader in your organization, really leading this team through change and transforming whatever it is that you're transforming to bring them to the other side of your project and realize the outcomes and successes that your organization needs? And it's a key question that I think everybody sort of should just ponder and spend some time thinking about. So communication, this is like a key. So I think it's, this one says like 20% of projects fail due to ineffective communications. So, and this, I think this has become harder recently because we're so distracted and there's so many tools. So we use all these tools to communicate, but we're not communicating. We're actually just passing along information via the tools. Communication is like what we're doing here tonight. We're sitting, we're having conversations, we're thinking about things. Communication is when we get our team in a room or we get them on a call. You know, and you need to shift your perception around how you communicate. How do you build relationships with people? Well, it's so much easier to build a relationship with somebody if you can see them. And we can't always get in a room with somebody, but we can do a Zoom call with them. Hey, turn on your webcam, let's Zoom, let's see each other as we're having this conversation. This one's great for vendors and clients too, right? Because if you can see the faces of the vendor on the call, if you can see the faces of the team on the call, they're less likely to be multitasking and they're going to be more focused on you. And because you can see each other, you start to get to know each other and you're building a relationship with them. And project management should really all be about building relationships. So communication is one of the areas that I think we all need to spend more time really thinking about how we're communicating. And I'm like, I will fire off emails really quick and there'll be one-liner emails. I've tried to do a little bit better with it, but you know, I still am trying to be more aware of what I'm doing in this space. And I think everybody can use some focus on really thinking about how they communicate, how the team is communicating, and how you can improve that. And really think about it from a relationship perspective. And think about how do you build better relationships on your team and with your stakeholders, and how can you use communication as a way to do that? And how might the current way that you're communicating be affecting your ability to really get stuff done and really gel as a team? So I think it's important to just think through some of those. And high-performing teams. So tell me what you guys think. What is a high-performing team to you? What are the characteristics or what are the factors that enable a high-performing team? You guys want to yell out some stuff?
Trust able to adjust and.
Trust?
Well, they're enabled to, you know, make adjustments quickly and overlap some roles and skills. So
Support each other.
like one in the box.
So trust, support each other, yeah, be sort of agile, flexible.
Conflict.
Pardon?
Healthy conflict.
Healthy conflict, the ability to have discussions, yeah. Anything else?
They can work independent of your oversight.
Yeah, they can work independently, yes, and get stuff done autonomously, support each other even. So this is some of the elements that I think are really important. So trust, Neil called this out right up. I call it mutual trust, right? The trust has to go both ways. You have to be able to trust them, and they have to be able to trust you. And trust, you don't just get trust out of the gate, right? Trust takes time. Trust takes, them seeing that you're going to go to bat for them. If stuff is coming down the pipe, there's stuff that's derailing what they're doing. Somebody's showing up in your team meeting and saying, I can't get my work done, I can't get my work done. What are you going to do? Are you going to chastise that person? Are you going to go to their manager? Are you going to say, look, tell me what else is going on? What can we reprioritize to do this? And if that doesn't work, then you go somewhere else and you say, look, this person's overwhelmed, I'm going to need somebody else, or we have to go on hold. Right? It's putting your neck on the line for people in your team and really standing up and supporting them. And you build that trust over time with those people when they see that you're going to stand up and you're going to have tough conversations, right? I often imagine it's like an umbrella, right? So if you're a project leader and you have this umbrella and sort of all of this sort of nonsense, I'm going to say, pleasant word, like not an R-rated word. This is coming down, right, from the higher up in the organization, and it's sort of hitting this umbrella, and you've got this umbrella over the team, and you're shielding them from all that nonsense and all that noise, and you're allowing them to focus on the stuff that they really need to focus on to do their work well, right? That's the role of a leader. That's the role of somebody who's going to earn the trust of a team. And all of the other stuff then, I think, comes in, right? Culture and respect. If And again, it's hard. We're on calls all the time. We're talking very fast. I talk super fast. And the tone when you're on a conference call and you've got this disembodied head is so different than if they can see you on a Zoom call, right? And I get told I'm abrupt all the time because people mistake my tone for being really unhappy with them, right? And so that's not going to help with the trust factor. That's not going to help with this culture of respect because it makes me come across as I'm being disrespectful, and that's not okay, right? Now I don't have that trouble if I'm in person often. Sometimes I do, but I've gotten better at honing that in. It's good to be self-aware, right? But on Zoom calls, it really helps if you can see the person and they can see you and they can see how interested you are in them. You're building trust, you're building relationships. So again, it's all back to building relationships. And challenging each other. Like that's not being afraid to challenge each other. That's back to the healthy conflict, right? Not being afraid to challenge ideas and sort of bring that group thinking to a new level. All right, so we're nearly there, folks. You can nearly go home. There's a couple of, I think I have a couple of slides, maybe 3 slides on this area, because I wanted to just break out the questions. So this is the first one, so resources. So do your resources have the right skills? So do you have the right resources on your team? Do they have the right skills? Do they know what they need to get done? Are they available to complete their assigned tasks? Do they have other competing priorities? So if any of these things are a no, then you would be sort of a yellow or a red. If you've got the right resources, they're all freed up and allocated to the project, they've got no other constraints, and they're working with you and everything's going well, then that cell is a green. And the competing priorities is a hard one because I think we're all faced with that right now. So many things to do. Okay, so the next one is the team collaborative. So how are you collaborating as a team? Does it feel like a cohesive team? So some of the clients I'm working with right now, they have these projects and the projects are running, but they haven't established a regular cadence of team meetings. It could be scrum meetings, it could be twice weekly, 15, 30-minute scrum meetings, it could be a once per week status meeting. There needs to be some time when the team can come together to have a fruitful discussion about the project and be able to collaborate as a team. And if you don't have that in the calendar and it's not set as a regular cadence, then your team's going to feel a little disjointed and they're not going to feel like they're part of a team. And guess what? If you've got resources that are part of a matrix organization and they're working on your project and they're working on 3 other projects and you don't have this cohesive nature about your project, well then they're going to do all the other work on the other project. Whoever's going to yell loudest is going to get their time, right? So you really want to try to build this cohesive team structure and bring people together and bring it together in a way that's actually going to work for them and is effective and respectful of their time as well. Are vendors included in team meetings? I see team meetings all the time where vendors are not included, and then there's gaps, right? So you've got to be able to have vendors in there and have good conversations. They're part of the team. You're all working to achieve the same thing, right? So they should be part of the meetings. And are the team working together to solve problems? Are they able to come together? Are they able to work independently without you being in every conversation with them, right? Work independently and collaborate together. That's a good sign of a highly performing, highly collaborative team. So team engagement is sort of similar to collaboration, but how are the team dynamics? Are they getting along? Is there nonsense that's sort of happening to the side that's affecting the team's ability to get along, or are the team really working together very, very well? Are they highly trustful of each other? Do they have a very high function? Is there a high degree of ownership and accountability? I mean, sometimes what we find on teams that they appear to be collaborative, but yet somebody's not getting stuff done, and there's distrust, and there's finger pointing at that person who's not getting stuff done, and there's this element of sort of unease on the team. In a highly performing team, that is not there, right? The team is all gelled, they're highly engaged, everybody's working really well together, and everybody's working on common purpose to get the work done. stakeholder engagement. So this is back to stakeholders again, back to relationships, right? So this is the leadership section. So if you're a leader, you're engaging your team, you're creating a cohesive team, but you're also engaging all your stakeholders, right? You're bringing your stakeholders together on a regular basis. You're making sure that you're taking them on the journey of the project, that they're really clear on what you're expecting from them, they're really clear on what they need from you. They're making decisions very well. It's a very effective decision-making process. And it's important that they come to the table on a regular basis and they're actually attending the meeting, not just that they're named on the meeting. We have a case in one client of a very senior person who shows up and announces himself at the start of the call, and apparently it's his mode to sort of drop off the call after 5 minutes. So when you try to ask him some questions later in the call, he's gone. And that happened to me once, and I'm like, oh, where did he go? Maybe he just stepped away. And they're like, no, he does this on pretty much every call. I'm like, okay, well that's a stakeholder engagement problem, right? So if that's the case, you've got to figure out what you're going to do about it. And are they keeping their groups informed? So often we think we get these stakeholders in a room and we're going to give them information on how our project's doing and what we need from them, and we're expecting them. We've told them 6 months ago when we had our first kickoff meeting, we told them that their role and responsibility was to take this back and share it with their team, right? But now we find out that we're having these decisions are getting made, and they're supposed to communicate those decisions to their team, because it should come from them as a functional owner, it shouldn't come from me as the PM, and they're not doing it. So there's a disconnect between what they're hearing and what's actually happening on the ground. So just be aware of that situation as well, with stakeholder engagement. Okay, stakeholders. Okay, and that, so I think that covers, so you can also color in like communications, decision making. Oh, and then I'm going to cover the last two, org change, in a second. So this should take you all the way up to the end, to the org change cell on leadership. Oh, okay, bring it in. Yeah. The next is cycle. Okay, are we good? All right, so let's talk a couple more points on organizational change in the leadership section that I just wanted to touch on. So as we get to we're getting into the meat of the project and we're thinking about delivering whatever it is we're going to deliver, we really need to start thinking about readiness for adopting. So I look at it from an organizational perspective. I also typically look at it from a systems perspective. So are we ready to deploy or launch or do whatever it is we're going to do? And here's like all of the different areas that go into organizational readiness. It's pretty much everything that you're doing as part of your project. And to manage change effectively on your project and really bake it into your project, there's a couple of things that you need to do pre-implementation. You really need to think about your readiness to even start the project. So we've got a client project that's going to start soon, and there's one person on this HR team, and she's probably going to be allocated to 6, 7 out of 10 working groups, plus the data extraction. Plus there's 2 other projects that's going to hit her organization at the same time. So that's an untenable situation, right? So are your team or your organization ready to start? And then as you're going along, making sure you've got the right people in the seats, that you're really thinking about how the change is going to impact people. You've got champions involved in the project. You've got change agents involved. You're coaching them. They're going back out and sharing information on the project with their teams. And then post-implementation, think about workflows, training, user adoption, hypercare support post-go live versus what does it look like in the long term? How do you get feedback back in from people? So all of these things need to be on your project plan if you're really managing change. And then if you're really thinking about helping people adopt, communication, how you're communicating it, communicating often, but who the communication comes from and the messaging on the communication is really important when we're looking at organizational change. Change takes time, doesn't happen overnight, right? People have to sort of sit with things sometimes to really think through what it means for them. And you really need to bake in a feedback loop to keep it going and really understand what that looks like. So just a couple of questions for the organizational change section. So are you actively managing organizational change in your project right now? Or are there other activities you need to include in your project and your leadership? And are your users getting ready to adopt that change? You might not be at this point of your project yet, and if not, you've got some time to put some pieces in place. But do you have change agents? Do you have user acceptance testing? Are you bringing in people from the organization that don't know about the project to do user acceptance testing so you can get a true test of how it's going to feel for them? Are they ready to adopt it? Do you have a solid communication plan? What emails are you going to send? What announcements? Who's going to send them? Have those been drafted? All of those things go into the organizational change piece and need to be tasks on your project plan. These are very real and very tangible activities. And if this is not done well, it creates so much noise and so much tension in the organization that it just distracts from all the good work that you're doing, managing and leading the project and getting it across the finish line. Are we nearly done? Everybody looks a little tired. We're getting there. Okay? Anybody green on the org change? Oh, perfect. Alright, so closing the project, so we'll go through this quickly. So, this is the other area that we tend to just sort of jump over and move past. So we've delivered it, we're done, let's move on. The next project hits before you close the door on the first project, and you just move on. But there are a couple of activities. So most of you are probably really not at this project, so you can't really evaluate where you are right now unless you're looking at a project in the past. But I just call them out because there's things that you can think about as you're going forward for the project that you're in right now. So just make some notes to yourself of things you want to include on your project plan. And I really want to encourage you to at least do a retrospective or a lessons learned. And how you gather the information for the lessons learned is really important. So on a lot of projects, I send an anonymous survey out to all participants, and I ask them to complete the survey. I collate the results into a PowerPoint, I get everybody in a room, and we walk through it together. And what that means is people have the freedom to give whatever feedback they like is given and provided to the team, so we can really learn and grow from it. But yet we get people together and we talk about what might have been missed, and we put together plans for what we're going to do going forward. And then we also communicate that up to executive managers. I used to in the past run meetings where we would just go through a list of a couple of questions and get the project team in a room, but I find that doesn't get me great information, right? Because people don't really want to talk about the real things that has actually really bothered them. So I tend to use a survey for it, and the survey's been, people really want to give feedback, and they want the feedback to go up. And there's often a lot of feedback that needs to be filtered back up to the executive steering committee, the executive stakeholders to say, hey, really thinking about your strategy, really thinking about what you're doing to your people. Here's how these projects feel to your people. Here's what you're doing to them. You need to be more thoughtful about your priorities, and you need to be able to have those hard conversations. So if there's one thing I would sort of call out to do here, that would be one I would bake into your strategy if you haven't got it on there already. And then don't forget to celebrate. And try to celebrate as you go along too, right? Celebrate milestones throughout the project. Bring your team along. So we're at the end. Sorry, where did that go? Oh, here we go. So now that you've got your sheet filled out, and sort of you can take a minute to fill out anything that you want to put in the close section. So just go through it and circle what's your top action. So is there anything you want to complete in the next 1 to 2 days? What's your key risk? What's your key bottleneck? And any actions that you really want to dial in the next week. So just highlight them, put a mark beside them, so that when you walk away and look at this tomorrow morning or next week, that you sort of have this exercise has been worthwhile, right? Because you've written a little action plan for yourself. Anything that you want to adjust or change with your team and how you're doing with the team, and anything that needs to be reset. So just highlight the stuff that are the real takeaways that you want to pull together. And then as you're doing that, if you guys want to take these cards, so I don't know if you've gotten anything out of today, if you want to put what your win is, if you want to put your email address on the back, and then we collect them and put them in a bag, and then I will email out a copy of the slides to you if you've provided your email address on the back. But anything, if you've got any feedback on the session, anything that you've got out of it, just mark that on the front of the card. And then when we'll collect those cards, and we'll do a poll for these planners. So we'll give everybody a minute to do the card. And then the other thing, so here's what I need you to do. So we've got this group to raffle off. So if you guys can, as you're at your table, select a winner at each of your table for who's got the best looking chart or the most, who's gotten the most out of tonight's session. Let's put it that way, right? So whoever's gotten the most out of tonight's session, you guys select them as a winner at your table, and then we'll sort of go around an eyeball, and I'll just pick the winner arbitrarily.
Is this the, I'm still working on it.
It's got that.
I work for myself. Well, I work for clients, but
Yes, and if you guys could collect the crayons and just put them into this Ziploc bag, I think. If you have a Ziploc bag on your, just throw them all into the Ziploc bag. Thank you. If you need a Ziploc bag, I think there should be one at every table.
What a good guy you are. What do you want? What do you want?
All right, so where are we with the has everybody picked a winner at their table? So you guys have picked a winner, okay? So can the winner at every table stand up? Okay, so the winner has to stand up.
Watch and observe.
The winner needs to stand. Okay, so you've got one winner here. Have you picked a winner? You guys have to decide. You have to decide the winner. Did you guys pick a winner yet? You guys have to decide. It's not about the most green, it's about who is getting the most out of this tonight.
Well, actually, she's alive.
All right.
Okay, and Heather.
What do we do?
All right, so stand up, hold up your sheet. All right, let's see. Okay, let's see what it looks like. Okay, got a lot going on. Oh my gosh, I might need help figuring this out. Okay. So, well, I'm not gonna look at the handwriting. So you got a lot of red on yours. You got a lot of amber, a couple of reds on yours. You got a lot of yellow, some red. That's pretty good too. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're gonna do this the easy way. I'm gonna tell you a number. Right. So pick a number. Did
everyone share the number?
Okay. So pick a number between 1 and 10. The person who gets the closest to the number wins the book.
3.
Okay, so you two were closest. So the number was 6. Okay, so pick a number between 1 and 3. Okay, 1 and 5. Pick a number between 1 and 5. 1 and 5. Okay, he's closest. The number was 2. All right. All right, have we gotten
And you get
our...
credits for reading it.
Still, does everybody get a chance to put their card into the bag for their... So just to give you a little context, so I use both the Kanban board and the Pi tool for electronics because I really like that. And I also use a planner. I use one that's a little bit larger and it's got some pink stuff on it. But for you guys, I thought you might not be into as much of the pink. So I got you this. I love these planners so much that I got them for all my kids. And I'm teaching my 11-year-old how to plan out his week on these planners. These are awesome, right? So I've got 3 of them to give away. Has everybody got their cards in here if you want it? Okay, so, all right, well, shake it up, shake it up, shake it up. Okay, you can pick the first winner. Sharma. Sharma? Oh, awesome. Got one. There you go. All right, so You want to pick the next winner? Scott Eaton. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, and let's see, Susie, you can pick the next winner. Okay, this. Okay, Strat, S-T-R-A-T-E-Q? Strategy.
Strategy.
Oh, strategy. Okay, cool. There you go. Woohoo! All right. All right, you guys. So thank you all. This is my details if you want. I've been trying to post sort of daily on LinkedIn about topics that may or may not be interesting to project leaders. So feel free to reach out to connect with me. I will send a copy of the slides to everybody who put their email on here. And hopefully this was helpful for you, and hopefully you've got some nuggets that you can take back and help lead your projects to success in 2020. So thank you all for sticking with me through an hour and a half.
All right, thank you again, Annmarie. If you want to claim PDUs for this event, just go to the PMICV.org, scroll down, go to the code, you can throw it right in there. So those should work. And join us again on Tuesday, February 18th. I've got a couple of ideas going on there, so I'm not sure which one of those is going to pan out yet, but we'll be here then. So.
And don't forget about the nonprofit workshop also,
Yep.
February 13th at UVM. So you can sign up on the website.
Good to see you. Thank you.
See you, Milan. Good to see you.